Leslie, I've got a follow-up for you because you brought up this issue of state money. I've done some research on your website and some things, and you kind of take the position that the state ought to get into its own currency and a legitimately backed currency rather than kind of a debt-backed or a fiat currency. Do you believe that's the proper role of states, or do you believe that the money system has to be changed through the feds?
State-chartered banks are controlled by the state. I'm not talking about Wells Fargo and U.S. Bank, but state-chartered banks. You know who they are? They're in Delano, Bloomington, and Rosemont. They're all over the state. And the rules for them, except for the involvement of the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, are controlled by the state of Minnesota. So if the state directs them through the legislation that we have out there, myself and my colleagues, to require them to create this electronic checkbook money to pay for all transportation projects in the state of Minnesota, roads, bridges, rails, ports, and the maintenance of it, city, county, and township. And by doing that, you bring wealth money into circulation. There's no interest or debt on this money. And the banks would not be required to carry reserves. And that's the way you're going to bring wealth money into circulation, to pay the debt out of the system. It's constitutional, and it will work. We just need to move forward with the legislation.
All right, Bill, you've got what I've described as a couple of different approaches within the Republican Party. How do you unify them to get your base behind you both financially and at the polling places in 2010?
We have to look, keep not turning this on. We have to really look at what is our goal. What is our ultimate goal? We're no different than a baseball team, a football team, whatever. There are differences amongst the players, but yet the coach brings them together because we have one common goal, and that's to win. So how do we do that? Some people want budget and fiscal responsibility. Some people have social issues. We work together, and we represent those ideas. Once we win, we work on those agendas one at a time. And that way, everybody is taken care of. But we gotta focus in our goals, remember our roots and what our responsibilities are as a party, and move forward. And that's the only way. We gotta be unified, because if we're not, we're just gonna keep going the way we are, and the state's gonna lose.
David, you're an elected official, have been for some time, and I'm sure you've experienced this with people that you represent that has very different and in some cases competing priorities and goals. What you gonna do about that to get them all excited about you in November of 2010?
Well, the first thing I've learned is that not everybody will agree with you. I've learned that in my 7 years in the legislature and 8 years on the school board before that, but even my wife doesn't agree with me all the time. So,
but she does call you senator.
She does.
It's better than me.
Only in public, Dave. I think we should recognize that there's all kinds of views that people who call themselves Republicans have, that we're not going to always agree on everything. I've been around the state in the last couple of months and talked to I don't know how many hundreds of people. I don't think there's been any two people, I would say, that have had exactly the same perspective on this, and there are differences. But the one thing I would say is that we should recall what the Republican Party is about. And if we look back in 1856, when the party was founded, that was a period of time of great division in the country. It was just prior to the Civil War. And the Republican Party was founded as a response to that kind of pressure that was building up. And what they did, and the principles of the Republican Party, they said you have to have two things. You have to have a commitment to the Declaration of Independence and the principles where it talks about the law of nature and nature's God. And you have to have the Constitution. And that's what they said. And that was what Lincoln did. And that's how he brought the country. You could say, well, it didn't bring it together. We had a Civil War. But he was successful in getting that idea firmly in place for the nation and restoring the freedom that our founders had created. And we have to do that. We have to recognize that without those principles in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution becomes unmoored, and it will be interpreted any way a majority wants to see it interpreted. And that's why it's important that we take both of those documents and use them together.
Go ahead, Phil.
I might at this point ask what the question was.
But
really what it boils down to leadership. You know, the Republican Party, when it was founded in 6 years in just over Ribbon, Wisconsin, it was free soilers, anti-slavers, and dissatisfied Democrats. They had their meeting, and they came out of the meeting founding a new party, and they called it the Republican Party because at best to them best express the idea of equality. And in 6 years, they put a president in the White House, and they were the party of change. They changed where no longer was a man considered a piece of property. And they changed that we would have a land-grant college act. And it's interesting in the land-grant college act that President Buchanan vetoed the legislation. And in '62, it was reintroduced and President Lincoln signed it. And that's why we had the newcomers had a grub stake, or the colleges were, the University of Minnesota was set up. And the idea I brought up of leadership, what leadership is in this industry that we're in, is that the leader creates a vision. Then he persuades you of that vision and he reviews you on it. And when our party did that, the first vision was that a woman shall have the right to vote. And because we persuaded the voters of that vision, the 19th Amendment was passed, and women forever will have the right to vote.
Marty?
I was interviewed at the Humphrey Institute when I was House Minority Leader asking, are you a George Bush Republican, are you a Tim Pawlenty Republican, or are you a Ron Paul Republican? And the answer is I'm a Marty Seifert Republican. We should not be bottled into the ideologies and the various branches of what some of our leaders have been. We have the fundamental core principles: protection of life, liberty, and property, freedom of opportunity to succeed or not to succeed, and we have other issues as well. I was asked, what are 2 pieces of legislation you've carried successfully that you're most proud of? One of them was the state government finance bill, where we downsized government and we had a record increase for veterans programs. I'm proud of that. You know what the other one is? I was chief author of the Woman's Right to Know bill that has resulted in thousands of less abortions in this state since I was able to get it passed and signed into law. It's not an either or. It's that we can be together and have those fundamental principles and articulate those. I've done that in my district, which has been carried by Amy Klobuchar and David Minky and Colin Peterson and Bill Clinton. But my re-election rates have been 60 to 70% because people are looking for one main thing, and that's common sense. And everybody in this room has it.
Marty, I gotta follow up for you. And folks, I'm keeping track here. I'm trying to spread the follow-ups evenly. I heard you made a comment that I wondered about, and I'd like to hear you explain it. It was after the press conference during which Governor Pawlenty announced he would not run for a 3rd term. You and Dave Sengen went out at a press conference and you were asked about, why Republicans should win the governor's office and so on. You said, well, basically to balance out the legislature, that we kind of need a balance between Democrats and Republicans in the state. I disagree. I think we need to win everything.
I don't disagree with that one bit.
The legislature is filled with guys and gals that make me look like a leftist. Okay, so where are you coming from on that? Did I misunderstand you? Or if you think there is that balance, where do you think the Republican platform needs to be tempered? I wanted to give you a chance to explain that.
Sure, and I haven't said anything about changing the platform or anything, but I think one of the things that we need to talk about, particularly when it comes to the legislature, is we need to articulate that vision and then win control of the legislature and get our candidates out there and make sure that they are all on the same page. That's one thing we did in 1994. Here are the things we stand for. My campaign is going to be doing that. Now the reality, that's the optimism, is we're going to sweep everything and win everything, and I think we can do that. Now, my entire life, the state Senate has been controlled by Democrats since 1972. Paul's entire life. So, yes, I think we can win it all.
Are you calling David Hann old? No, go ahead.
No. Yes, I think we can win it all, and we need to articulate that. But at the end of the day, look at how frightening Washington, D.C. is right now with the Democrats in control of everything. It is something that people need to put in their head, that we need to make sure that we have Republicans elected to office. Now, I used the counterbalance example in that press conference. You can use whatever example that you want, but I am trying to be a little bit realistic. We want to come in and say we're going to win it all, and I think we can. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of people out there who say, you know what, we have divided government. If we go into Washington, D.C. right now, you're going to see an awful lot of big government liberals in charge of everything. And I think that makes people stop and think right now, particularly people in this room.